Well, good morning and welcome once again to another session of the Kirklees Democracy Commission. This morning we're joined by Neil McInroy, who is representing the Centre for Local Economic Strategies. He's also very much involved in wider consultation across Greater Manchester as part of the People's Plan, which is an initiative which I also am part of. I'd like to first welcome you to the Commission. As we well know, we're living in interesting times, as Eric Hobsbawm would say. The European Union referendum has not only changed our relationship with the European Union and the rest of the world, but also has politicised society in quite radical, in some ways, quite unexpected ways. And that has merged into a wider shift across the United Kingdom, where the tectonic plates of constitutional architecture of the country have been reformed over the last 20 years or so, and particularly in England. We've seen since 2014 the emergence of the Northern Powerhouse agenda and also regional devolution. Across the north of England, we've seen 5 city regions already emerge at the government plans, and many more. One of the things that I think is most laudable about Kirklees Democracy Commission is that they've sought very proactively to engage many of the questions that these issues raise around what are the implications for local governance and for local democracy? How does that affect the role of the council and that relationship between the citizen and the state? Many of these questions Whitehall and Westminster haven't considered. They've not really thought about the implications on local democracy. First, before we start, I'd like to just introduce the rest of the Council Commissioners. One of the beautiful things, and I think one of the most positive things about the Kirklees Democracy Commission, is that all the 4 political parties have bought into the process, and the Council Commission represents all 4 parties, and I think it's probably appropriate for them to introduce themselves.
Hi, Gemma Wilson, one of the councillors, a member of the Commission.
Andrew Paul Flumen.
Andrew Marchington.
Andrew Cooper. You're making it hard for me.
We've been trying to true. We've been trying to work out a way of communicating different versions of Andrew, Andy, and we got down to But, yes. It's interesting. We're a week away from the Labour Party conference in Liverpool, and one of the things that I thought that the trials, tribulations in Liverpool raised was that tension between representative democracy within the PLP and participatory democracy within the wider membership. Yeah. And I think that's an issue which affects all political parties and also wider democracy, that there has been this tensions, opportunities through the approach of localism and other things. And it raises questions about, what this relationship between representative and participatory democracy. And I wonder whether you might want to say, to start with, a few things about how you've seen that tension change over the last few years, and in many ways, are there examples of good practice where councils are addressing that tension between the two?
Surely. Well, thanks for that. Hello, everyone. And just to say, just an introduction, I'm from the Centre for Local Economic Strategies, which is the UK's leading member and research organisation dedicated to local economies and for local economies that create great people, improve people's lives and great places. We've got 40 members, we work across the UK, we're a charity, but we also increasingly work across Europe and beyond. We come at this from an economic perspective, but we're interested in obviously democracy, public service reform, and how all that plays into creating a great local economy. Taking a more fundamental starting point in terms of the question about representative participatory democracy, it's quite clear that the great places of the world, the great places of England, the great places of the UK, there is a sense where there's an interdependency between public, representative democracy, social in terms of participatory democracy, and also participatory democratic forms in the commercial sector too. The great places, the places that sustain, the places that endure, the places that have great economies and lives, if you like, it's where there's an interdependence between public, social and commercial. So the relationship between participatory and representative democracy is fundamentally important. And of course, traditionally we've seen representative democracy, particularly in years of the kind of municipalism, where you've seen the power of the town hall very much has been at the apex and things flowed from there. I think that has its merits, but it's in abeyance. And what we do need to see is a much more synergistic or interrelationship between participative and those representative forms of democracy. Why it's fundamental is because participative democracy, that engagement of people in their neighbourhoods, in communities, is fundamental in terms of how you create great places and how you deal with some of the challenges around fiscal austerity and public service reform. One example would be we all look after elderly relatives or children. Yeah, we do that. We don't charge by and large for that. We just do it out of the goodness. At the edges of that, there is some public sector support to it, but it's been measured. All the acts of looking after elderly, looking after children, it's been measured or quantified, and it's worth something like £90 billion. If it could be quantified, it's not quantified. If you put in the wages and all the activity that takes place, we'd be £90 billion in terms of the English to the English public purse. Now, if we didn't have that, imagine what would happen in Kirklees. Yeah, the whole society would fundamentally fail because you couldn't sustain if there was not that activity in those localities. So these small acts of neighbourliness, of looking after relatives, is a participatory act. Yeah. And we need to see that augmented and supported, yeah. And that's what I'm saying. It's fundamentally important that those participative acts, those acts in those places, are augmented and supported. Otherwise, the public sector is knackered because we couldn't afford to do some of that. I was in Portland, in Oregon, 2 or 3 years ago, and I met the leader, the mayor, and I asked him, "Tell me about Portland," and he said, "It's about the people. It's about the people. It's about the people." And that seems like a glib phrase, but what he actually meant was, and you look at Portland, what it actually meant was that the people come first, and his offices and the representative democracy of the offices were there to serve the people and to make the people sing and to make the people do things in their own way. Yeah, it's not a municipality saying like, "We've got a department and we're going to do things to you people." It's saying, let all that stuff just sing, and we'll do the bits that's between the gaps, and we'll kind of organise and coordinate and maybe enable. I think that is a key thing here, that you enable people, civil society, to kind of do stuff. Maybe going a bit more abstract, I see this is that in previous times, or traditional ways of doing local government, there's a transaction. Yeah, you provide a service to the people, and the people pay their council tax, yeah, and you say, "There you go, Andrew." Yeah, that's what you get from us, the transaction. We need to think much more about the relational approach to government and how it operates. It's not so much a straightforward transaction, it's more about how do you relate in lots of different ways, not just providing of a service, but how you relate to that person and their lives in the community in lots of different ways which support civil society and support the way they act.
It's interesting because it sort of raises the sense in which there's a change in that representative role, so that local councils become facilitators, enablers, networkers.
Yep.
They're far more enmeshed in a wired way around their communities, but also that in some senses that there's a change in political culture and maybe even political psychology, that there's a shift away from a very Victorian model of representation. And I wonder whether you could say a little bit more about how you could possibly go towards that second shift, beyond the shift in role, the shift in culture and psychology.
I think there is, in one sense, it's quite easy because it's about behaviours and attitude of the council and the individual councillors and obviously officers. And I think it requires a sense of humility, yeah, in the sense that you are not the uber powerful, councillor or the uber powerful department. You are there to facilitate and be a conduit for a whole range of other stuff that happens. So that it requires a humility. And I've had this conversation many times with elected politicians, and it kind of gets to the situation like, well, hold on, I'm in a powerful position. I've been elected by a range of people, and I've got a duty and a power, and I don't want to lose some of that power by distributing it. I think there's a mindset that kind of says, you know what, by being an enabler and a conduit, I could actually have more power I'm a key player in a network of activity. Imagine a hierarchical diagram, council at the top, and then the kind of tree diagram, yeah? The council, departments, down like that. If you think about the role of the councillor, and the council is more of a network, where you're in the middle, and there's a whole range of stuff that flows from it, and I'm more of a mesh, but you sit there as the kind of person in the middle of that network activity. Or even you see this network activity, and what you are is you're the person that's the overseer of the weave, rather than this hierarchical thing where the power stems from you.
Rather than the tree, it's the wheel when you're in the middle.
Yes, the hub and spoke. Yes. Or even there's a whole web of activity out there, including council activity, and you're almost like the fisherman who looks after the net, the weave of activity.
I suppose it raises one last question, which because I think the council come in, which is about this notion of representation, and about who are these councillors representing? Are they representing their political parties? Are they representing local authority? Are they representing their citizens? This has always been a tension within representative democracy. How do you think this change in becoming more enabling, more facilitating, more networked, the spoken and the heard, how does that change that relationship in terms of party politics and the local authority itself, the demos?
I think the representative role is a key spinal connection you have with citizenry. The fact that you're elected, the fact that there is a manifesto, the fact there's a political or a party architecture. It's one of the key spinal connections in the snowflake or the hub and the spoke. It's a key thing there. But I would say that's where the humility comes in. I don't think it's the only one, and it's not the only way that you influence and affect change and create a great place. I think there's other relationships you have that's not directly related to that representative role. And so it's a matter of I am the representative. That's a key spinal connection I have with citizenry. But there's other things I do that gives me authority to get involved in. And I think it's one of the I think when you get poor councils and poor councillors, I think, is when they see that representative role and that spinal connection is the be-all and end-all. I think a whole range of other stuff goes on in civil society, a whole range of other stuff happens, which councillors should not limit themselves to purely that power that comes through the act of voting. You should be able to have influence in a whole range of other types of connections and relationships, and use other forms of power that come from what the representative role gives you.
That's really helpful. Andrew, you look like you're ready to come in.
Not particularly. I mean, I just agree.
I'm trying to read your ears.
I'm just agreeing a lot, and I think there's on the humility side of things. I think there is something there, and I think about the opposite of that. The opposite of that is old style paternalistic politics, and some of that is ingrained in some, dare I say, some old style politics and old style political parties in some ways, in the way that they've approached things. Maybe they've evolved and changed, as many of them will have done, I guess. So I think that's the thing that needs to be broken down. And the thing about spokes and snowflakes and all these sort of things, it's still got the councillor in the middle of the spider's web, and I think that's the area where we've got to think of, yes, we are the people who can enable things to happen. We're the ones who can make those links and everything, but that doesn't mean we're on the top. That doesn't mean the spider in the middle of the web. It means that we're the people who go around that snowflake, making those connections and making things happen.
It's still a pivotal role in that.
Yes.
It's very difficult. Just bring Andrew and Andrew, they'll bring you across. You're not Andrew, are you?
I can change if it's easy.
It'll make a lot of sense.
One of the obviously one of the advantages when you get yourself elected is that you inherit the title of councillor, which therefore means that it's easier, or theoretically easier, for you to open some of the doors that you need to open to show exercise that influence. Now, it was suggested to us yesterday by one of our witnesses that it ought to be legally binding on all organisations, be they public, private, to respond to any inquiry that councillors are making of them to make that pivotal, influential role a lot more effective. Would you agree with that?
Just coming on that as well, the other thing is we have contractual relationships with some of these organisations because a lot of the time we are private organisations and carrying out public sector functions, and I don't think FOI requests can't go into them, can they? But you would expect as part of that contract perhaps that we say, hang on a minute, there's these councillor folks here.
It seems to us at times that the only weapon that's available to us is screaming, we are the only ones that got the democratic legitimacy to do this. We're elected by the people.
Don't you know?
Yeah, exactly. And, people like the health service, for example, wouldn't understand democratic legitimacy if it jumped out at them in the face.
I think this is interesting and fascinating. Really. It's a moving beast, really, in terms of devolution, where power is shifting around. I would say, though, just to unpack that a bit, I think contractual arrangements are something that is where you should have some kind of duty or some kind of authority, which means that any contractual relationship you have, or even where you're a stakeholder or a partner in any of those activities, that requests or relationships with councillors should be very strong and a spinal connection to it. And so I think that's one thing, and I think they should be the authority of councillors, particularly in contractual arrangements or in partnerships or other areas of public service. You should have a strong connection to that and a preeminent position perhaps. But there's a whole range of other things that is not within your jurisdiction, where you're not contractual relationships or you don't have a partnership or stakeholder position in it, where I think that sounds like a stretch hammer to crack a nut, and I think power and influence needs to be earned through action and through the way you behave. And so I think the power of your agency and those other sorts of relationships, it would be silly to put down some kind of stipulation. I think it's something that's earned through the way that you act and the way that you contribute to the aims and challenges of those other organisations. For instance, your influence with the commercial sector, where you don't have a contractual relationship with, seems to me that to go around thumping, stamping around saying you must speak to me because I'm the councillor, it's just going to go the other opposite way. I think it's much more about how can I help you in your business? Is there any issues you have in terms of planning or roads or whatever? How can I facilitate your business to be good? How could you use me as a conduit to the powers and legislation that's there? Have you got any problems in terms of the wider political field, in terms of MPs or all that? You have that as an offer, but rather than being some kind of stipulated relationship.
So thinking about that, it would be rather, I agree that you can't wander around stamping your feet and going, I'm a councillor, don't you know? But equally, on the other side of things, it's a bit hit and miss, isn't it? If it's a bit hit and miss, you will get some people who have good relationships with business, good relationships with industry, and they will work on that. So it's a matter of seeing what's in between that can actually mean that there's more opportunities, if you like, for councillors to engage with those organisations outside.
Well, this is when you get into, I think, the range of other services and other activities that council are involved in, and I think that's where public service reform comes in. I think some of the departmental activity, some of the policy activity, some of the service activity that councils get involved in are perhaps a little bit too clunky. Take the example of business development. It seems to me that business development departments tend not to build a relationship with businesses that effectively. It tends to be awfully about a transaction, grants or shop fronts. It seems to me that it needs to build a different form of business development activity within a council, and councillors play a key role as a connector, as an enabler and a conduit within that. It's about building relationships rather than saying, I have a business development service, do you need it?
A very structured.
Yes, I think there's much more about, and that means the service itself needs to be more reflective. It needs to flex and bend to the needs and wants of that particular cohort in terms of businesses, rather than devising a service and then that's it in a box.
Expecting everything else to fit into that. I think that's
and Blackburn recently we had a conversation about the reform of economic development service and the role of officers and councillors in that. And it was seen that they had the business development team, and the conversation went, well, why isn't every single councillor part of that team too? Because they speak to businesses all the time in their wards and in their, why can't they be woven in to the business development operations of the council? And so opposed to having a business development team, one of the job specifications, if you like, of the councillor would be to be cognizant of harnessing intelligence, having relationships with businesses within their wards, which could feed back into that.
Do they provide training for that? Do they upskill councillors?
Well, it's not there yet, but I think that is the way that a modern councillor would be, that opposed to fulfilling something comes from the citizenry or businesses and feeding it back to council. They're much more as a conduit, much more as a worker within that particular
sort
ward.
of democratises and equalises that role of business facilitator of local councils. It takes it away from simply being an executive role and gives it a whole council aspiration.
Possibly. I mean, if you widen out the concept of representation, the council's representative role, then businesses placed in your ward, they're effectively your residents too. And sometimes there's an idea that you don't just represent the people who voted for you, because obviously the majority of people don't vote for you or don't vote. Young people, if you're under 18, they don't vote for us, but we still represent them, don't we? And actually we brought our idea of representing the businesses that are in our ward, that wider idea of what we call as representatives.
Surely. I think there's something interesting about the DNA or the culture of particular administrations, and I travel around all over the place, and you get different types of emphasis, like in Buckinghamshire, a Conservative authority. I think there's a sense that the council there and the councillors, it's one of the most successful economic areas in the UK. It's got 7 or 8% growth rates, as you'd imagine. And I think a councillor said to me said that like 99% of the stuff that goes on in Buckinghamshire has nothing to do with me. All I can possibly do is to make sure that 99% works as effectively as possible, and that means I need to have freedom and a whole range of relationship building activities. So it's a different kind of. I'm not advocating Conservative councils, by the way. I'm just saying as an example.
No, that's fine.
It's kind of saying the mindset and culture of what the council's for is different to perhaps some northern or some other more traditional municipalism type way of thinking. Yeah. And it's like the example in Portland. The council there, well, it's a democratic, left of centre, if you like, council. It does have this sense that they are not preeminent. Yeah? It's not everything flows from them. They are there as the 1 or 2% to make sure all of the other 99% works effectively.
So the imagining of the civic space in many ways.
Yes,
it's a very interesting approach. To bring in a Conservative councillor. Joe.
Thanks for the cue there. Looking at the view that the public perhaps have of politicians, from parish council through to MEPs. Just wondering about as we're changing to a much more facilitatory, enabling type role. Just wondering how we can actually get the public to almost support us and recognise what we're actually doing if we're not doing stuff directly for them, if that makes sense. For example, I've very, very small local group that I've done the baking for the last few years and put chairs away at events. And when you do that when you're unelected, you're a great community asset, but as soon as you're elected, what you're doing is stop your job. And it's that switch almost that people have where you're only doing it because you're only ever thinking about the next election. I think people almost don't almost don't believe as soon as you're elected that you still maintain that community interest, if it makes sense. There's a scepticism there. And actually, if we're not in a position where our residents are contacting us and saying, here's my problem, can you fix it? And we actually say, well, here is how you fix it, and here's how I can support you, with fixing it, rather than actually doing it for them. I just wondered how we're going to try and sort of battle our hearts and minds really with the public.
Yeah, I think it's variable across the country in terms of the extent to which the public feel that way towards council and councillors. I think there's something around two things. Firstly, the extent to which things that happen in that place is co-designed or co-produced with the people of that place. So it means that it's to try and make the citizens, people feel that they have that they are a priori, they are very early stages in terms of some of the things that affect how services are delivered or how that place runs and functions. And that requires a much more earlier relationship building with citizenry and people about council services and what they're up to and what they do. Also, I believe that localism is particularly important in this, and the distribution of power and the distribution of decision making to local level. So I believe that the ward councillor and ward councillors need to have a ward budgets, significant ward budgets that are co-produced with the actual people. So I know you all probably have ward committees and ward budgets. It seems to me that ones I've seen, I'm not going to Kirklees, but the ones that don't work very well are where the councils all sit round and then they did, maybe some members of the public, they decide what should happen to the kind of the money, and then it gets distributed accordingly that way. It doesn't start early enough. Yeah, it should be, we've got £50,000 for this year. What do the business think we should do with it? What do the people think we should do with it? It's our money, but we want to co-design and co-produce what we do with this with you. And I think that makes the people feel that, of course, the council's there to help them, but they're in partnership with the council rather than being a service transactional relationship, or they're always there to do stuff for you. And also that conversation, I've seen it happening, and I've been part of these kind of different types of ward committees, can prompt some interesting conversations, because a business might say, well, I could maybe put some money into that, yeah, or maybe I could work with you on that, or somebody else, I could put. It actually might increase the 50 grand to the 50k to something else in terms of match funding and different things that come in, if it's done early enough and it's not seen as council money, we're coming to you and we're going to do stuff to you with this money. That's quite a brave act, but I think an important one in terms of this culture.
So timing is important in that engagement.
So. That's really good, and there's examples of businesses making that contribution to communities around all sorts of things. But the problem is, one of the issues when I engage with it, the thing that you can do from this is cut the business rates, which isn't within our gift. And we did have a bit of a conversation yesterday about fiscal issues, which would be really good to talk to you about how we again as being advocates enablers for businesses in our area, what sort of engagement should we have with businesses, the local economy, to try and improve things.
I think that's a massive area. That's been doing a lot of work at CLES on this business rate repatriation and all that stuff, but I think what you have here is we need to appreciate that we've got a dominant narrative. I think that comes from central government and is in businesses as well, that say business rates are a bad thing, I want to reduce them. That's there's the cost element to it, and we don't actually get the benefit element as a strong narrative. What do businesses get for the business rate? What would happen if you had no business rate? You had no business tax. How impoverished would the inputs to that business be in terms of roads, in terms of services, in terms of waste, in terms of all the things? And I don't think that narrative, we understand it of course, I don't think that narrative is strong enough. So there's an importance in any council to say, look what you get, around that spend.
That's not just business, though. I mean,
No, it's a
it's a whole thing.
It says as well.
Yeah, and is it the US Financial Reserve or something? They have tax as the price we pay for civilization, and so that there is that whole idea is being diminished, right? And business certainly has got that view as well, but I think also it's wider in the sort of wider citizenry. So I think there's probably a job to be done there about saying, like you said, tax brings benefits.
Which is fine, yeah, but it does. But money is spent. It's taxed to do infrastructure.
We're going to have to do that because when we're going to be shifting to the fact that we're going to be relying on business rates when central government funding goes and we get them.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to convince our local businesses that they're getting something from Kirklees, or else they've got to leave.
But I just want to wider question. I frame this within the Commission's sort of remit, which is this question about how do we both communicate with citizens about what the council does, how taxes are spent, what kind of services are spent, and also in a way it sort of comes to this question which Gemma sort of touched to, which is about how do you actually engage with the community and explain what the role of councils are, because all these things seem to be wrapped up in the sense about there's at best there's a misinformation often about what councils do, what they do, what the purpose of taxes and what the benefits are, what the positive elements of it all are.
I think some of this, and there's no easy solution. I think a lot of it's just hard work in terms of changing the narrative and changing that relationship. But one of the things I think is important is that in my experience, transparency and presenting the challenges to those other stakeholders, citizens or businesses, are fundamentally important. If you had a group of business people around here and said, here's the money we're getting, here's what we spend on, have you got any inputs you can give as business people how we can square that circle? And look at the challenges we have. We could cut down on waste, we could cut down on light, we could cut down on these things. How would that affect your business? Do you think we should spend more money on the kind of inputs to your business as a factor of production, of a factor of your success, or should we reduce it? These questions are in everybody's mind in their own world. In household budgets, the same thing. I think to place that in a priori early doors way, and then I think that's you've got obviously your chambers associate, your chambers here, your trade associations. It seems to me bring them in and say, look, we've got this new business rate policy. We've got this is our intake in, this is our output. What are we going to do? We want to devise something with you, which works for you as a business. So
in the same way we feel that participatory democracy in communities gets to better decisions. She talks about actually participatory type of democracy in businesses hopefully will lead to better decisions around things they would be really interested.
Completely. And I don't know anything about Kirklees Chamber of Commerce or Huddersfield Chamber of Commerce, but traditionally in England, right, and I'm being overly flippant, so I apologise, I was getting broadcast probably. They're a cross between a Rotary club and a golf club. If you look at Europe, if you look at Japan, if you look at South Korea where I've been recently, and you look at USA, Germany, the trade associations and the chambers of commerce are they're part of a contract. They're part of a deal with a local state. They're in there. They're co-designing how services. Exactly. And there's a relationship there. It's not a transaction like business development. There you go. And that kind of compact contract relationship is what is the basis to moving forward effectively as a locality. Because you need to, when you're making hard decisions, the palatability of those decisions, including increasing business rate, reducing business rates, is only going to be palatable if the people they've smelt it, they've had a little taste of it, they know exactly what's coming and why it's being done that way.
Traditionally, we use them as consultees rather than partners.
Yes. Yeah, that's Andrew.
Two particular points spring to mind. One of which is IKEA, which is based in Andrew's ward, which he represents, and I believe how much do they give the council each year through business rates?
So people say the largest contributor in Kirklees.
Yeah, you sort of look at that and think, well, what relationship does Kirklees have with IKEA? Does it go and see them? Does it say, "Oh, hello, you give us a rather lot of money. Let's have our yearly meeting to discuss things." So that is sort of curious to be, should we be doing that, and thinking about how we do that? So that's one sort of thought. Another thought is about chambers of commerce things, the way you described them. One thing that springs to mind there is the Bristol pound. The Bristol pound sprung from business. It did not spring from politicians. It didn't come as a decision from Bristol City Council, but it was something there which was about promoting local business. It was about establishing a currency which would enable them to trade within each other. And as I understand it, it's been pretty successful. Well, that's
it's still growing. It's still growing. It's a remarkable success.
And so you sort of look at that and think, well, that's something that we would want to be a partner in, but we might want to see business lead on it. And so there's things that they can do which are incredible and innovative and match our needs, but we might not necessarily have to be the leaders.
I think that's two things that are interesting in terms of IKEA. I think across many places in the world, there is localities that have a signature commercial activity in that locality, who in some senses dominate the locality. When we talk about the snowflake or the hub and spoke, it seems to me that the strength of the relationship between the council and those key anchors, those key commercial anchors, is fundamentally important to the destiny of that place, and that needs to have a sophisticated, detailed, preeminent perhaps relationship in terms of the future destiny of that locality. So it's fundamentally important there is proper engagement and relations with these organisations. And most places like IKEA and other big organisations have their own community CSR type facility, which I'm always gobsmacked in many places I go where it's very much the council's not going to them with offers. It's very much the organisation, the commercial organisation, usually a bit more sophisticated, and they're kind of saying, we'll give the council that, or we'll do that. I think there needs more sophisticated engagement and relationship with business, not just in a kind of free market way where we're going to hear and get out of your way and you do lots of stuff, to try and look at the wider philanthropic, the wider civil society
role, social role.
The wider, I met with the managing director of Brother UK, who's based in Tameside, and it's a Japanese-owned company. And employ I think they employ about 300 people in Greater Manchester. They've got wider supply chains, of course, that filter all the way through the UK and Greater Manchester. And that fella talks about business citizenship. He talks about the role of Brother as a anchor in a really poor part of Tameside and the ripple effect. And he sees their employees as just not just employees, but obviously 24/7 citizens. And he's not just interested in the 8 hours a day they work. He's kind of interested in what they do in the other 16 hours. Not in terms of intrusive, yes. but what they're doing and how they contributing as Brother employees, and how
work fits in,
and how they as employers could facilitate their employees to do more in their community. So that is from a Japanese mentality, I suppose.
Do they encourage more volunteering, more sort of civic engagement?
Indeed. Yeah. And that requires offer and conversations and relationship building with those key anchors. On the Bristol pound, which CLES has done quite a lot of work on local currencies. In fact, we've advised Lambeth Council on the Brixton pound, and we've evaluated that thing. Bristol pound is very successful, and I think it fits the cultural and social milieu of Bristol. In Brixton, it's been a success. It has cost the council some money in terms of facilitating the process, but nevertheless, that is one way of creating this relational, post-transaction relationship between the council and businesses. It's a less
citizens too,
and of course citizens, and of course there's all benefits to the local economic and social life of that place as well from those local currencies. But again, that is one good example of the kind of relational thing we're talking about here in terms of how the council works with and for business.
In Bristol, I think the councils and officers can be paid in Bristol pounds.
Yeah, I think it's
so. And then I think staff can actually get a certain proportion of their salaries fiscal pound. So that means that the money has got to be spent within the local economy with local businesses, not large conglomerates.
So you're arguing for the Kirklees parent?
I'd actually say I'd actually argue for Huddersfield because that sense of locality,
that sense of identity,
that sense of identity
You
is
support Andrew's allowance being paid in that sort.
and I'd be perfectly happy to do that. And that's
that's been really helpful, by the way, Andrew. Do you want to listen?
Yeah, because again, actually, Kirklees is a centre for advanced manufacturing. It's one of the largest manufacturing areas in the country. Actually, there sounds to be nationally involved. Is there particular things about because the narrative has always been we don't make things anymore. And clearly, we always have done, and we still do, and actually we're very good at it. So there's something particular about manufacturing, advanced manufacturing businesses that we ought to be aware of.
Well, what intrigued me about the particular sectors is how it seems to me that the question basically, if there is this strength in advanced manufacturing, how does that ripple through the local supply chains? Right. And it seems to me there's an offer from the Council on Economic Development that goes into the advanced manufacturing companies and says, we're interested in ensuring there is as much gain from your brilliant activity as possible to Kirklees, and we're interested in your supply chains. We're interested in who is your local suppliers, and if there is how can we support those local suppliers to compete with other suppliers so that we can plug into you, because we want to densify and increase the strength of the great stuff you do locally. You're not saying you want them to be pro-local, biased towards pro-local. You're just saying you want to see what you can do to strengthen the supply chains into that activity. Also, there's the whole thing around skills and who are your employees. What can we do to make sure more local people are getting the jobs in your great industry? There is a kind of offer. It's not saying we want. It's just kind of saying how can we. Here's where we're coming from, and you can understand because we're Kirklees. What can we do to ensure that as much benefit as possible is coming out of your great stuff?
Reinforcing that facilitative role, but in a different way than with your community, but on the same principle.
Indeed. And of course, I don't know about economic development in Kirklees. I'm sure it's excellent, but there is strains of clunkiness around economic development across England, in which the economic development has its strategy, and it says we've got the advanced manufacturing. But is it really getting into this relational and the subtle elements of how you build economic strength and sustainable economic strength? My feeling is that tends to be in the minority rather than the majority of how economic strategy operates.
Especially because those connectivities are already in the economy, aren't they? The way in which the supply chain works is a form of network in itself.
Indeed.
It's tapping into that network.
It may be, look at the snowflake idea, it might be like, or a wet or a spoke, hub and spoke. It might be like, is all those spokes effective? Are they all working, or is there some of those spokes actually a bit weak? If you've got at the end of the wheel advanced manufacturing companies, what are the spokes and relationships you have as a council with them, and how are those advanced manufacturing relating to other citizens and other businesses?
I think one of the things that I think of coming from the university is the way in which, if we think about the fulcrum role of the local council in business development, business networking, is bringing the knowledge economy into that cycle as well. And I think that you are in a unique position in many ways to actually build those kind of networks that bring higher education, further education institutions into the loop to affect better targeted training and to train the direction of the economy.
I mean, I was in a conversation with the mayor of Jeonju, which is a city in the middle of South Korea. We got on well, actually. He was a great guy, but anyway, he you just hit off with people. Weird, didn't it? We couldn't speak without a translator. But what he said was stuck with mind and compelling is that he was interested in a massively successful location in terms of lots of different companies, people that feed into the Samsung phones and supply chains. They have a massive amount of success economically, and he was interested in the role that businesses had in early years and building next generation of workers. The businesses did buy into that kind of idea, so it got right into childcare, and right into the community and social milieu of people's lives, is because they knew that if they didn't get that right early doors, that company wouldn't be successful. So you can see the depth and maturity of understanding about how that business's success is predicated on something in 20 years' time. And the council,
strategic
and the council, his offices had a role and obviously in a relationship to make sure that there was this new generation of workers coming through. And that meant a whole range of different things they were doing in terms of the businesses supporting childcare and doing other things with their employees in terms of childcare, because they've seen that as fundamentally important in building a sustainable economic future for that locality. In the England or the UK, what would happen would be is they're like, childcare, the business might say, that's nothing to do with us. Yeah?
Sure.
Yeah, and you might think childcare, that's not economic development. Well, it is. It is economic development, and it is something to do with those businesses.
If you look at the Kirklees economic strategy, one of the words which will feature quite a lot in there is resilience, resilient, and everything, because that's a good thing. And as we know, and I think that the test.
Moving on.
The test of that would be when things go wrong, when there is some global economic problem, when Brexit happens or whatever it happens to be, just mix that in there. But is how the local economy responds to that, because that's about resilience. And so I just wonder about your views about how we actually, as a local authority, sort of build resilience into the system, and what our role is in making sure that we have a local economy which is resilient when things go wrong.
Well, they've touched upon a huge interest there, as of course we've done a number of work on local economic resilience over a number of years. I've brought some publications that cover that kind of thing, but I think in a nutshell, one of the key things here is that we see resilience as the ability to deal with shocks and inevitable changes like Brexit and global crashes and what have you, but it's also a proactive ability to grab opportunities. It's a springiness that can. It's something that you hit something and it can solve the problem quickly. But it's also an ability to go opportunity, boom. Yeah, it's a resilience. It's a positive as well as a negative element in resilience. And in that, there's something fundamentally important about the local as a ballast to any global shocks and change. And also go back to the previous point about its public, social and commercial interdependency in relationships. All resilience is predicated on the strength of the connections and relationships between people and agency in a locality, and if you don't have that, it will be weak. And that's part of what our international work told us. For instance, we went to Culiacan in Mexico, which is 15% growth rates. It's cooking on gas. This place is economically successful. Was it resilient? No, because what it had was American foreign investment creating 15% growth rates, many people coming from no harnessing of that wealth for the public sector. The public sector was denuded. You've got a huge amount of social infrastructural problems. You have many people move to that area to get the jobs, and there's very little social capital and social bonding. In fact, there's some conflict between different groups that have come from different parts of Mexico. So there you have, the lack of the relationship between the public, social, commercial created a brittleness that didn't lend itself to resilience. In contrast, went to Yokkaichi in the Midlands of Japan, which is similar size actually to Kirklees. There was a big Mitsubishi factory there. It is resilient as a locality because what it has is effective harnessing of wealth in relationship with Mitsubishi and other suppliers. It has a social sector which is invested in, and which is a close relationship with industry and with the public sector. You have a strength of bonds, a strength of connections in that locality that lends itself to resilience. And we don't want to go on about this, but we now at CLES have a range of measuring resilience of a place and spotting where the weak connections and the weak relationships are, and then you put in some policy to make sure that it was strengthened. We've done that in a number of locations. In fact, we've mapped it in all 479 Scottish towns above 1,000 people. So we've mapped the resilience of Scottish towns according to that public, social and commercial relationships.
Very interesting. Just to bring Andrew in, and I'm going to try and move on to the second reason why we brought Neil here, which is to talk about the sort of wider manifestations of combined authorities. That's okay with everyone else, but Andrew,
just taking those examples that you mentioned, why have we got it so wrong then?
That's a massive question, Andrew. I would.
Could one of the could one of the reasons be that our local government system goes back nearly 200 years, and we've got that conflict between the two established political parties, and one saying, "Oh, business is brilliant," and the other saying, "Let's enhance the social side of it," and neither actually want to come together and do what you said they've done in Japan.
I suppose to look at that question a bit differently is, if you take a certain situation, whatever the status is in Kirklees, how do they begin that journey to start to mesh those two positions as you describe, as in Japan?
Yeah. There's many reasons. I suppose that could be one. I think more about what you do. I think it is fundamentally about a recalibration of the relationships you have in the place, and whether it's left, right, whatever. I think it's actually about much more about ensuring that place functions effectively, and that requires in the modern new place, in the modern new economy, requires that fundamentals of how the public and the social and the commercial operate within that locality, and there needs to be strong and enduring connections between those elements. With no elements is seen as supreme or preeminent. Yeah. That's what's required, and that's what the great places of the world, I think, have, and the enduring places of the world have. The ones that don't work are the ones where commercial is seen as more important, or the public sector think we know what's best, or there's a sense of a disparate social activism that moves into the space in the absence of commercial or public strength. And if you go to India, the NGO sector's massive there. It kind of keeps places functioning, but it's not that great because the public sector is not strong enough and the commercial sector is too greedy and too exploitative.
It's like that stability that you talk about.
Indeed, it's the relationships that need to be forged.
So in a nutshell, you're not just saying that there should be a different role for elected members, you're saying elected members need to change their attitudes.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm minded a senior politician stood up at an event that we ran and said, not too far from here, and said, he was speaking to the supply chain, the suppliers of the council, and he said, I could write here now lots of things in my procurement processes in terms of social value, in terms of lots of legislation. Yeah, I'm not going to do that. What I'm saying to you now is, we are really worried about youth unemployment in this place. Yeah, and what we want you to do as suppliers is to think about how you're tackling youth unemployment and to come back to me with some ideas. And it seemed to me that small epithet, that small moment, kind of said something very different about what that council was trying to do. It wasn't about, we are going to tell you in contracts what you need to do. It was saying, come and tell us how we tackle this problem. And it's your kids as well that are going to be unemployed. It's your relations as well that's going to be...
It's co-ownership of that issue.
Yeah. And just that small bit of soft power, that demonstrates the kind of relationship and attitude, which is the kind of thing that's demonstrable we're seeing.
To move on, thank you very much for that, by the way. I think that was really enlightening. We've not really looked into that business element of the remit of the Democracy Commission in great depth, and that was very interesting. I think one of the things that we're very sure about is the Democracy Commission is a cognitive process, it is a strategic process, it doesn't end with a report. As often with some of these commissions, that they tend to like very good at identifying problems, they tend to be less good at thinking about how you go on to solutions. And the Kirklees Council and the officers and the councillors have bought into this idea that this is a process that won't end simply with the end of the commission itself. One of the things that will drive that, of course, is ongoing regional devolution and expansion of the localism agenda, and it's clear that at Birmingham this week that Theresa May is buying into both the notion of the Northern Powerhouse in some senses, and that regional devolution will go forward, although we're not quite sure of the model. It seems elected mayors seem to be becoming less popular as a form of leadership. But in that sense, I think it'd be interesting to get some of your thoughts. And Gemma, you were wanting to sort of look into some of those issues.
Yes, thank you. I think it's a fair assumption that all of us in the room, and extended across the whole 69 councillors, we have a greater interest and understanding in the move towards devolution. But it's still a minefield to a lot of us that don't have an exec function, because it's such a big thing, it's so complicated, and as Andy said, it's still quite up in the air with exactly what we're going to get from central government. Bearing in mind that it's potentially a minefield to us, how do we actually get it across to the public in a way that's relevant and interesting, and actually show them the opportunities that brings? Because my concern is it's perhaps just seen as another layer of governance, particularly at a time where all of the headlines are talking about the financial challenges that we face. And my concern is that from the press angle as well on it might just be it's another layer of sort of snouts in the trough, which seems to be the attitude that a lot of people do feel when we look at any reforms.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I understand the fears and worries and issues around it. A few things to say, really. And one is, the devolution process is broadly centrally controlled, despite the noises that this is something that has come from below. It's a Treasury-inspired activity, or was a Treasury-inspired activity, and it's very much about the economic, not about the democratic, the social, the environmental. So it's an economic project by and large, and of course that comes with the elements of technocratic things that may be quite difficult to digest from a local point of view. So that's the problem we face, is that it's kind of top down, and it's kind of economic and doesn't go into the wider things that might affect people's lives, bar further down the line ideas about jobs. The second thing is the devolution, and the way it's starting to be forged, is a new centralism. It's a new narrowness. We've had the Whitehall narrowness, and now what we're getting is through the combined authority is another centralisation. So in terms of the power residing mayors and the power coming through the combined authority, rather than the distributed power of all the individual component local authorities and individual councillors. So it's kind of a mini Whitehall model going on here. So there's another problem we have. So we've got the economic domination, we've got this new forms of centralisation of power. It strikes me as that discussions through your leaders and other players into the discussion about what devolution means needs to move, and move rapidly, to the democratic, the social and the environmental. And that's kind of what this work here has been trying to do at CLES, and obviously this thing here, creating good city economies, has tried to do. It's tried to extend, and another work that's done called the double dividend, it's trying to extend the horizons of what devolution's for. And we talk about a social devolution, a democratic devolution, all those elements need to play in. And we're in the foothills of it, but it seems to me that individual party leaders and individual leaders of authority need to get onto this agenda pretty quick. Otherwise we'll have a devolution that will fail, because what is power to the people is passing power down, and if the power gets passed down to a new elite, then that's not going to work, and it'll falter. And if we start to get very poor mayoral turnouts, for instance, or it doesn't capture people's imagination, or there's no social dividend or social return on the devolution project, the people are going to be mighty unhappy. And devolution and the broad aims and aspiration of devolution are too important for it to be left to the centralisation of power in a narrow economic frame. And so in practical terms, I think it's to get the leaders of this authority and other political party leaders to start getting on to the wider narrative of what devolution's about, and maybe read some of our publications and might help them. An individual councillor point of view, it seems to me that I'm so convinced by the flaws. I think it's a flawed process. I think individual councillors need to start shining your torch on the flaws and saying how it does not going to work properly, including the centralisation of power and the domination of the economic, not the democratic, the social, environmental. So individual councillors need to stop being so compliant to the agenda and to start being a little more belligerent and shining a torch.
More belligerent.
Around to say that's not a problem.
Because for sure, I think it'd be a good electoral tactic.
Electoral tactic.
Can I just take that on because Yes, let's thinking about your role at CLES, as a stakeholder in the development of Devo Mankinova, devolution deals, and also your interaction with the People's Plan, which is an initiative in Greater Manchester, which is a wider consultation. One of the biggest complaints about devolution that we've received from both our work with local citizens and with local councillors is a sense that the terms of the deals have been elite-led, they've been a little bit done in dark, closed rooms, and there's a sense in which there's not been an attempt, really, to consult either with councillors, backbench councillors, or with the wider citizenry. And that when consultation has been undertaken, it tends to be post hoc, it tends to be rather service accompli. How can Kirklees, in a condition where, of course, there hasn't been any West Yorkshire combined authority deal yet signed, there hasn't been a greater or lesser, whatever, there's been no combined devolution deal signed yet, how could they proactively address that problem, do you think?
Yeah, that's good. Just a kind of little input to that is that we work across the UK and Europe and beyond. We're in Manchester, we're based in Manchester, we're 30 years old, and Manchester City Council sit on our board, as a range of other local authorities do, and we have I suppose I always say we're married to traditional local government, but we seek to explore the alternative, and so we try to bring the two together. And in that, because we're in Manchester, we play we have two hats in Manchester context. One is we have the abiding relationship with some of the local authorities in Greater Manchester, and we have a range of service level agreements and contracts and stuff we do for them. But also we are actors in our own right as individuals in terms of wider stuff that goes on in that place, including the People's Plan. And just taking the service level agreements and other relationships we have with the formal architecture of Greater Manchester. Manchester increasingly, as you know, has been lauded as an economic success story, and that's debatable, but let's say that it has. It's realised that it still is one of the, I think, 1 in 4 children in poverty. It's huge poverty issues and social issues in that place. And they have introduced the Greater Manchester Inclusive Growth Review and a range of other things to try to combat and counteract that. And they are seeing, they're reflective of the flaws in the existing devolution model and how it could be improved. And the Greater Manchester Inclusive Growth Review is a process to try and extend the envelope of the narrative of what devolution should be and who's it for. And that's the formal architecture of Greater Manchester. And CLES is involved in that as an external partner to try and help them. So that is a realisation that Manchester's coming to. It's not universal. It's not the main narrative, but it's starting to be developed. And in fact, this morning there's been a communication with Jean Stretton, who's the leader of Oldham, who's now the cabinet member lead for social inclusion, who's championing this wider narrative of devolution. So there's something there about the formal auspices of combined authorities and elected politicians to actually start to extend the envelope, and that has been happening in Greater Manchester. In fact, I think probably in Greater Birmingham it started from that position. I think Birmingham is potentially going to move fast on this. In terms of the People's Plan and other forms of activity, it seems to me that we do need to engage with participative democracy, with civil society, to enlighten them and to make them have an opportunity to have their say within the process, within the devolution. And the simple question, how can devolution help you? What does devolution mean for you? Is an excellent exercise to undertake. The combined authority itself in Greater Manchester are undertaking this through a survey process, which is fine, but it has its flaws. The People's Plan is a group of academics, think tanks, civil society, activists, unions, anyone really, come together to say, let's have a genuine deliberative democracy, a participative democratic process, to get people have their say within the process. I don't know, it seems to me as a first step on that side of things, Kirklees, Huddersfield, wherever, what could devolution do for you? What do you want out of devolution? You could have the big Huddersfield conversation. You know, this is all going on. What do you want for Huddersfield as part of this devolution? And what you'll get, of course, is a range of great ideas and stuff that covers not just the economic, but the democratic, the social and the environmental. Because that's what matters to people's lives. And that is a brilliant basis to then say to the leader and say to the combined authority, hold on, what's all this stuff you're talking about in terms of like hard infrastructure for economic development or what's happening in Leeds city centre? This is what people want from devolution. It's not what you're stipulating, what the Treasury is telling you should stipulate. So I think the processes, many other things, citizens' dues, and Andy's got them in his back pocket in terms of things you could do to enhance the engagement of people in a new and vitally important piece of policy and innovation that's happening across England.
I just think about if I went knocked on a door in the area I represent and said, "What do you want from devolution?" I'd get a very confused look from the householders. I might try and explain to them what devolved powers might look like to the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. I'd get another confused look, and so I'm just the practicalities of how you do it and how you make it work. I think it's something you can say, but is it something you can do?
Yeah, that was my thought, that until we know what the deal's likely to be, we can't say to people, what do you want out of the deal? And the only thing they're likely to remember is, we're going to get we've got an elected mayor forced on us.
And we're going to have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Right, it's not certain you'll get
No, but that's the bit people remember.
Right, let's explore some of the other stuff, because we've had other presentations about looking at outcomes, and actually would we get, what most people want is it's the transactional stuff, so I want a library, I want better roads and this, that and the other. If we start talking about outcomes, what outcomes do you want? So going back to what we tried to do in neighbourhood renewal, which is on 10-12, about health, education, environment, employment and safety, and then buying into those broader what outcomes, and again, what outcomes for our area is the devolution settlement going to do, and then actually how can it facilitate? I mean, we've done that with some of our communities. That was one of the most satisfying things as a council when looking at a village like Longwood, 3,500 people, they've got a mechanics institute in the middle, they've been tried for years, but actually when they start saying, for us to be able to do this in our play, we need to tap into these. So they've got a cafe, they've got the building's fully used for table tennis, which is for all the residents, which is about the health agenda. They've tapped into those. That's the outcome, but that was the outcomes they and their community wanted to achieve, and actually this is the way that we can achieve them.
I think that's right. I think you wouldn't have to be asked the crude question about devolution, but you're asking what kind of outcomes do you want. And at the end of the day, do you have devolution, despite all the noise around it? I think in the political class or people that's commentary around the devolution, we kind of get beguiled by it. But at the end of the day, it's just the means to an ends, and the ends, the outcomes are what's important. There is something about the this is where the democratic elements of devolution are so fundamentally important, and it's not the centralisation of power. Devolution has to be where people are closer to power and closer to decision making. That otherwise we're not doing it. It seems it's the fundamental basis to it, and that needs to be conveyed as the new thing that's going to happen in terms of outcomes. More influence in what happens in your area, more influence into elements of policy or service delivery. Those things are fundamental, and the worry, of course, is that in the way it's been constructed, that's not being considered as part of the devolution.
Technocratic approach.
It's
you
technocratic.
lose that aspirational element about what citizens want out of it.
Exactly.
It approaches it from a very different question.
Exactly.
Just to sort of push it on, because I think one of the things that has come out both from our engagement with councillors and our engagement with citizens is a lack of surety about how regional devolution might affect the role of the council. We've talked about this role in which we see it within the context of the ward and of the local authority itself. Do you see that regional devolution might affect, recalibrate, alter the role of the councillor in that more combined model?
Yeah, completely. And the trajectory is not good, because taking the idea of the centralisation of power and resource to a combined authority, an elected mayor and a cabinet, there again you can see how there could be the collapsing of individual social services or individual elements of service delivery under the auspices of individual councils, pushed up to a wider combined authority. So what you'll see is the power not moving down, but power moving up to a combined authority. So that's quite significant. It would hollow out individual boroughs and individual local services and individual departments, and that's what we're going to get. That's the trajectory we're on. And what we need to do, of course, is to advance a devolution which is distributed, which is not the centralisation of power, which protects the unique role of individual councils and councillors as a key element to the distribution of power and the relationships they have with citizens and with business. And that has to be argued and fought and battled for, it seems to me. Otherwise we'll get something that Kirklees, what will it be? I don't know how many people in, how many
420,000.
420,000. How many local authorities are in? Five. 1 over 5, and you'll have a mayor and you'll have a combined authority, and your leader will sit around and he'll have a cabinet portfolio, and the cabinet portfolio will be for transport, and then you'll have a central commissioning body across the combined authority, and you'll be not a strategic policy, you'll be a delivery arm, and the delivery arm will be in the mothership, which will be somewhere in the middle of Leeds. So what will local councils do? What you'll be doing is you'll be overseeing delivery and have very little influence on strategic policy, and that's important, of course, because the needs and wants and desires of the citizens of Kirklees and Huddersfield and individual localities in Huddersfield is a damn sight different than what would be in parts of Leeds or parts of wherever.
And do you think that will have implications for governance accountability as well, and the role of the council within those processes?
Completely, because the role, the statutory role of councils will be denuded and hollowed out, because that will be placed within the hands of the combined authority. And so that will automatically reduce your power and reduce the authority you have over the system. That is why. And even in Greater Manchester and other areas, mayoral candidates are starting to talk about a whole range of new architecture that protects councillors and protects councillors in this process. So new forms of engagement with councils, new forms of engagement with citizens. They're talking about this, but they're in the foothills, because it's only just now they've kind of thought about this. I suspect, given some areas we're going to get an elected mayor by next May, and I understand some of the architecture and processes already being discussed now for the incoming elected mayor. These are base camp at best. These are not sophisticated means to ensure the individual authority councils and an augmented role for individual councillors.
So it's bespokeism, it's piecemeal, it's lacking that sort of strategic approach towards these issues.
I think the strategic approach is there, but the strategic approach is not the type of democracy that I've been conveying here today. It's a democracy which is narrow and thin. It's narrow when it should be broad. It's shallow when it should be deep.
Yeah, that's good.
In view of what the Commission is looking at, and I think you possibly hinted at the answer in that last sentence, you're saying that devolution is a direct threat to the sort of change in the way the council works, as we discussed in the first 3/4 of an hour, because if we as local members are going to go see and engage with our businesses, I'm going to go to IKEA and engage with, they're going to say to me, go away, I'm not about talking to you, I'm going to go talk to me Leeds now, combined authority. And the concept of decisions being as near as possible to the people on the ground, well, you're describing a model that's the exact opposite to that.
Yeah, I would think at the moment I would express it that it's rather a threat, it's a weakness on the present model, and the subtlety there that's important. And the weakness is because it's been predominantly focused on the economic. Once we start moving into democratic devolution, consider democratic questions, or questions of social, and questions of civil society, and questions of the effective and adroit, smart delivery of services, then I think we will see those weaknesses being highlighted, and hopefully a broadening and a deepening will occur, because they'll kind of say, well, it's okay economically to think about a city region and to think about the big economic basis to how this place functions. But when we get into services, and we get into how people are represented, and we get into civil society, that doesn't operate in that footprint really. So we need to think about something different. It's a weakness because of the way that devolution has been constructed, and that's where we are right at this moment. But we need, it's dawning, I think, a little bit in some other areas about how those weaknesses are apparent. It's the job now to make sure that those weaknesses are addressed, and we build a true democratic and social devolution on the back of what we have, which is largely an economic one. That's what needs to happen. I think we're in the foothills, and not many elected leaders or officers get that, but it's growing, and I'm optimistic. I had a meeting a few days ago with a leader of a large local authority, and he gets this. If you look at the forward in this work from the Mayor of Bristol, he gets it. Yeah, he gets it. In fact, he says, and I won't quote, but he says it. Yeah, so it started. I don't know the City Region well enough. I don't know what the messages are, what the mood music is. You need to work out yourself. But it seems to me that look to Bristol, look to what's happening in Greater Manchester, recognise that there's weaknesses in this economic model that's been solved by Treasury, which in part, even economically, is a bit of a pup. But that's another story. Look at that and start questioning it, expose those weaknesses, and start to
we need to learn from that.
And even this city region, you could say you could learn by the mistakes, and you can maybe jump ahead.
Yeah, but I've been building on from that. It's a question I've asked a number of people can do that. Is about what would the basic building block of local democracy look like to feed into a more robust city region, and actually ideally into actually more effective governance for England. So what would it be to tie together the things you talk about, public, social, commercial? I mean, if you've got an idea about what it might look like.
I think
there's a suggestion.
No. There's some things need publications, and what I said about public, social, and commercial. I think it's fundamentally important. The building block of local democracy is how I would go a little bit before that. I'd say the building block of great places, is public, social, and commercial interdependency relationships. And you build democracy, place-based control, and then you build democracy, which facilitates public, social, and commercial interdependency. That's what the great places do. The idea of being the key bit in the middle of a snowflake, or to oversee this weave of activity, this net. That's what the great places of the world and the enduring places of the world have. They have the building blocks is the people, the place, the assets in those places, making sure there's great public, social, and commercial relationships, and then the democratic supports that those relationships working.
And that can work, and then that links in with, a small place can link in with bigger places.
Indeed,
And
indeed.
if that works effectively, they can interact.
Indeed, and one of the and that's exactly it, and that comes at the devolution thing a whole different look at. You wouldn't devise devolution, you come from that position. Devolution would be run by CLG or come from a local government association. It wouldn't have come from the Treasury.
So if we look at sort of like Oregon, we've seen the municipality of the Oregon Metropole, isn't it?
Yeah, in Vancouver.
Then the
Yeah.
Stuttgart and stuff.
Yeah, and I think that the building block of place, you could easily see, and you can easily imagine, a nested approach to devolution, and you would have a city region, a combined authority function that was actually based upon the things that were best done at a city regional level, compared to a local level. Yeah, and economics is a weird dynamic to start. It's one of the worst places to start in terms of devolution, because economics, unlike other service areas and unlike identity of people and where people feel they live or where they inhabit, economics is aspatial.
Yeah.
Economics gives no hoot to locality. So it's a weird place to start if you're talking about devolution. It's the worst place to start because it actually is not about it's not about a place.
Well, it's not about citizenship. In that
No.
sense, is it?
Yeah.
One of the things to sort of just to finish up, we are getting very close to our time. Is one that sort of links to what Andrew was saying, and it manifests itself in this term of space, place, and identity, and our interactions with citizens has often come back to the fact that Kirklees itself is a product of 1974, as is Greater Manchester. And in many ways that raises questions about, well, how do you inculcate, how do you develop a sense of civic identity that people buy into and frame their citizenship around, whilst also reflecting these very strong local identifications which people feel, both socially, economically and politically?
I think I think there's many locations around UK and beyond where there is the geography is an artificial administrative geography rather than one based around identity or
heritage
or whatever. And it seems to me that the best way you can deal with those administrations is to put in place governance mechanisms that allow the individual components of those localities sing. So, for instance, I'm working recently in a new council in Northern Ireland, which is Armagh City, Banbridge and Craigavon. What a bloody name. Yeah, a lovely place, but they've got...
You should find a place like we've done in Kirklees and give it a name that encapsulates...
Well, the councillors couldn't agree, of course, the name what they would be. So but what you have there is Armagh City, a rich, architecturally historic city. You've got Craigavon, Portadown and Lurgan, part of the old Craigavon, which are industrial towns who service the agri-food business. And then you've got Banbridge, which is a market town, a rural market town, which is in growing population because it's on the Belfast-Dublin corridor. So you've got three distinct entities as part of this new council. And we're working with the council to try and ensure that the economic and social functionality of those places is supported and augmented and accelerated and developed in economic and social growth terms with the wider council as an entity. And so it means that we're looking at having the strong Armagh City cohort of councillors and looking at how they have a degree of flexibility and autonomy within the system, within the council system itself. This is not easy, of course, but it seems to me that is a key element, that the individual place identities and heritage and its functionality needs to be detailed, described and recorded, and then the overall council seeks to support and augment those individual ones. The worst thing that can happen, I've seen it happening, where you get the banging of new places together, is that there seems to be this, the strategic, we need to get a vision for Kirklees. Yeah, we need to get a vision for this new thing. Yeah, and what you're trying to do is construct something out of the raw material that doesn't allow you to construct it. You're trying to build a aircraft. Now you've got as a couple of toilet, you've got different bits, that don't lend itself to creating that thing. And it happens all the time.
We've done very well in the past to do that.
But you've got the balance, haven't you, by respecting local identity, but not people to shrink into Huddersfield or shrink into the individual locality. So there's a balancing job. But what you should not be doing is to think, and I don't know Kirklees well enough, but what you should not be doing is to think there is the Kirklees vision, which is not, in fact, bespoke and respective of the deep and abiding identity and heritage and culture of the individual localities. And in fact, your competitive advantage in economic terms and in place terms is not Kirklees. The competitive advantage is the individual components of this borough. That's your competitive advantage, because no investor or no activity can really build on something that's a fragile brand and a constructed brand out of somebody's...
It feels very abstract.
I feel abstract.
Time has flown, and it has been a extremely enlightening and interesting session for us, and very valuable. And we'd just like to thank you, Neil, for your enthusiasm and your engagement and your ideas. It's been a genuine pleasure. The way in which we approach the Democracy Commission is as a conversation. Some commissions tend to sort of go away, extract ideas, disappear off into a darkened room, and then suddenly a report is revealed, and you sort of think, where was I in this process? This is a conversation. We are getting locked in a dark room. At the end of this month, we've finished taking our evidence taking until the white smoke emerges. We're going to be producing a draft report, and that draft report we're going to send to all citizens that have engaged with us and also all the stakeholders, including yourself. And we really want to have feedback. Two things as far as yourself's concerned. One, that we've captured what you've said in a way which you feel is accurate, essentialising many of the arguments that you've made, and also that you can give us a sense of a sounding board on some of the conclusions that we've come to. We really think that is part of the process we're very keen to maintain. Once we've got to the other side of that, we will then be submitting the report to the Kirklees Council and also engaging on a local, regional, national scale.
Good.
With this, I'm working with other people, particularly Professor Colin Copus and the Council Commission, so we're working with other work on this. And I think in that sense, I think it's highly likely, if not almost absolutely certain, that we will be coming back and thinking about how Kirklees Council and the Democracy Commission can work with CLES, because I think that there are so many synergies in the kind of work you're doing and we're doing. I think it would be an opportunity missed if we didn't. But for the moment, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And goodbye.
Thanks a lot.